Hi, my name's Nadine. A few years ago, I was sleeping on a stranger's hallway floor with nothing but a throw blanket and the sound of someone else's laughter behind a closed door. Now I have a house, one I paid for alone, one I built from the ground up with no help. And suddenly, they say I'm selfish, because I won't give it to my brother. The same brother who forged my signature. The same family who said I wasn't really theirs. They called me cold, but where were they when I had nowhere to go? Why is it always the one who survives who ends up being accused of cruelty? Want to know what happened when I said no? When I finally stopped folding? Let me tell you how far they went, and how far I had to go just to be left alone. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet for someone who'd once slept beside a humming vending machine just for the noise. I set my keys down on the small ceramic tray by the door, hung my jacket on the peg next to the thermostat, and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Home. My home. No one else's name on the lease. No one waiting inside to tell me I was late. Just me. I walked over to the table and opened my laptop, scrolling without thinking. A new notification pinged at the top of the screen. Facebook. Dean. The message read, "Heard you've got space. Dean's been struggling. Why are you so cold about family?" I blinked at the screen. Cold? That word stuck harder than any insult. I closed the laptop and stood still, staring at the room I had built inch by inch. They didn't know. No, they didn't care to know what it took to get here. There was a time I didn't even have a floor to sleep on. Let me take you back. It was late fall in Eugene, maybe 12 years ago. The rain had been coming down hard for 2 straight nights. I was 30, jobless, carrying 2 tote bags of what little I owned. I'd tried everyone, my brother, my mother, even one of my aunts in Portland. No one had room. Or more truthfully, no one wanted the weight of me. Dean didn't even answer the phone. Mom picked up on the 3rd ring and said, "You made your bed, Nadine. You lay in it." I had. But I didn't know that bed would be a hallway floor in someone else's apartment. A friend I hadn't spoken to in months reluctantly agreed. "Just for tonight," she said. "The couch is full. You can use a throw blanket in the corridor." And that's where I was, curled up on laminate tiles, back aching, nose cold, the blanket barely thick enough to cut the draft. I didn't sleep. I listened to her laugh with her roommates, a different world just 15 feet away. At one point, someone asked, "Who's the girl on the floor?" "She's got family stuff. Just ignore her," my friend replied. They did. I whispered to the ceiling. I wasn't broke because I was lazy. I was broke because life hit hard and no one caught me. And still, no one showed up. That floor wasn't just hard. It was humiliating. It taught me more than any classroom or paycheck ever had. In America, family comes second, until they need you. A few months later, I ran into Mrs. Harlow, my old middle school teacher, outside a Rite Aid. She was exactly the same, blazer, gold-rimmed glasses, the kind of woman who remembered birthdays. "Dean, huh?" she'd said when I told her I was still in town. "He was always so charming. I remember him telling us once, 'Nadine's not really family.'" I assumed he meant adopted. I froze. "I didn't think he meant it cruelly," she added. "He was just a kid." He was a kid, yes, but no one corrected him. That belief followed me like a second skin through high school, college, and now into my 30s. Dean said I wasn't family, and they let him say it, again and again. You can forgive a child for being ignorant. It's harder to forgive a family for never correcting the lie. Back at home, in my little 2-bedroom space, I stood in the kitchen and touched the edge of the counter. Everything in here, this toaster, that second-hand table, the dent in the refrigerator door, was mine. No one gave me any of it. No one helped. I used to tell myself I was invisible because I made people uncomfortable. I realize now, I was invisible because they didn't need me. I was the rug beneath their feet, not the wall they leaned on. Nobody checked if I was okay, because they expected me not to be. Scrolling through my messages again, I read another comment. Selfish. Family's about showing up. I almost laughed. Where were they when I was sleeping on linoleum with a shoebox for a pillow? I shut the laptop gently, walked over to the door, and turned the lock. Twice. Then I pulled the curtain back, stared out at the street. The sun had dipped low behind the fir trees. I remembered a winter day when Dean drove past me at a bus stop, windows up, eyes forward. He knew it was me. He just kept driving. Now they call me selfish. They say I'm selfish for not opening my door. I whispered to no one, but no one asked where I slept when they shut theirs. A sound pulled me back. A knock at the door. I stood still. Another knock, firmer this time. I stepped to the peephole. Dean stood on the porch, hair a mess, holding a toddler in his arms. His eyes wide, not sad, just expectant, like someone used to being received. I didn't open the door. The day I signed the mortgage papers, there wasn't anyone waiting to shake my hand or offer congratulations. I didn't expect them to. The woman at the desk asked if I needed a moment, and I almost laughed. I didn't cry. Not in front of her, not over a loan. When she handed me the keys, I remember walking out to the parking lot and just standing there, holding them, letting the weight of that small metal key dig into my palm. The air smelled like asphalt and wet pine, and everything felt too quiet for what had just happened. There's a kind of silence that follows survival, I murmured to myself, not because no one hears you, but because no one thinks you matter. Later that evening, I took a photo of the porch light, the soft amber glow against the gray siding, and posted it on Facebook. No caption, just one line. Built this life from scratch. It got a handful of likes, a neighbor, a woman from the warehouse. Then Dean commented, "Wow, must be nice having government checks pay off, huh?" I stared at the comment longer than I should have. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. Let people see it. Let them see what family does. 2 hours later, a text from him came in. "Don't get cocky. It's a trailer house, not a mansion." Not once did he say congrats. Not even a sarcastic, nice job. Just mockery, served cold and casual. I sat on the floor, my floor, and reread the message until the letters blurred. It wasn't the insult that hurt. It was how easy it was for him to strip my win down to something pitiful. He couldn't stomach the fact I'd done it without him, without anyone. This wasn't about jealousy. It was about control. Dean had always needed me to be less so he could stay more. Still, I kept moving. I painted the walls myself, replaced a broken screen door, laid down secondhand rugs. I even baked a cinnamon cake from scratch, my own strange ritual to mark something sacred. When the house started to feel like mine, I mailed an invitation to my parents. Simple, polite. A tangia dinner. Just the three of us. Inside the box, I included a slice of that cake. Homemade. Wrapped carefully. A note. Hope you can come. Friday at 6. The box came back the following week. Unopened. Smashed. The slice of cake was flattened inside the box, stuck to the note like glue. There was a post-it from my mother on the outside. "Don't send pity gifts. We're not your charity cases." I held the box in my hands a long time. Then I put it in the trash. Slowly, without a word. I didn't cry. Sometimes silence is the strongest form of protest. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table that never had a chair for me. That night, I stayed up late cleaning. Not because the house was dirty, but because I needed to remind myself that I owned every inch of it. The broom, the curtains, even the mismatched plates in the cabinet. They were all mine. For the first time in years, I bought a welcome mat. Something cheesy from Target. It read, "Come as you are." I set it at the front door, then stood there for a minute, smiling a little. There was no one else to see it, and that was fine. It's funny, I thought. The word home used to mean them. Their voices, their opinions, their rules. Now it means walls that don't talk back. It means quiet that isn't laced with judgment. Just then, my phone buzzed. A group family message. I almost didn't look, but curiosity won out. It was from my mother. Your brother and Savina lost their lease. We think they should move in with you. You've got extra space. No question mark. No request. Just a declaration. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I didn't type anything. I didn't need to. 5 years ago, I bought a bottle of cheap Pinot Noir and a pie from the co-op grocery, wrapped them carefully, and convinced myself they'd be welcome. I didn't have an official invitation, but there hadn't been one the year before either. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe the new job, the savings account, the small apartment that I paid for on my own. Maybe those things meant I had earned a place back at the table. Hope is a dangerous thing when history has taught you not to have any. I wore my best coat that day, a deep green wool thing I'd found at a thrift store and cleaned up with a lint roller and faith. I remember adjusting the collar as I walked up my parents' porch steps. The pie was still warm in its box. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from everything unspoken. I knocked, waited, knocked again. From inside, I could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of plates, a burst of laughter that might have been Dean's. No footsteps approached the door. I pulled out my phone and texted my mother. "Hi, Mom, I'm outside." A few minutes passed. The reply was curt. "We decided to keep it small this year. Dean and Savina are here with the kids." That was it. No next time, no sorry, no room. I looked down at the pie and wine. For a second, I thought of turning around and chucking them into the nearest trash can. But I didn't. I placed them on the doormat, adjusted the bottle so it wouldn't roll, and stepped back. They weren't just full, I thought. They were full of everyone but me. As I walked down the driveway, I heard the door open. A child's voice. Then the door closed. No thank you, no call-out, just the continuation of a meal I had never been part of. The next day, I ran into Lena Durst at the drugstore while picking up a refill for my blood pressure prescription. She was standing in the seasonal aisle, comparing pumpkin-scented candles. "Hey, Nadine! Wow, it's been forever!" She hugged me like we hadn't graduated 2 decades ago, and I let her. It was easier than explaining how lonely I'd become. "I still remember that big fight you had with your brother," she said, too casually. "Your mom told everyone you weren't her daughter anymore. We were what, 20? She was so mad." I froze. It wasn't the comment. It was the ease with which she said it. Like a memory she pulled off a dusty shelf. Harmless to her, earth-shattering to me. I smiled politely. "Yeah, people say things in the heat of the moment." "Still," Lena said, lighting up with the memory, "she meant it. For a while, we all thought maybe you were adopted or something." I nodded, made an excuse about needing milk, and walked away. At home that night, in my cramped little rental, with the flickering kitchen light and the heater that rattled when it kicked in, I sat down with a pen and one of the blank cards I kept in the junk drawer. I wrote, "I didn't walk away." I was dismissed so many times I forgot how it felt to knock. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I folded the card, held it over a tea light, and watched the edges curl into ash. In the present day, as the leaves turned gold again, I walked past the same co-op grocery. Thanksgiving displays were going up. Cranberry sauce in bulk, boxes of stuffing, an entire refrigerated wall of turkeys. I didn't flinch. I had already bought my groceries. I'd be making butternut squash soup and cornbread stuffing for myself, and, possibly, Mrs. Keene next door, whose kids hadn't visited since her husband passed last spring. No fanfare, no forced grace, just warmth and quiet. Sometimes the loneliest table is also the safest one. I returned home, set my bag down, and slipped off my boots. The floor was warm from the sunlight that had poured through the windows all afternoon. As I moved toward the kitchen, my phone buzzed. It was a group family text. My mother's name at the top. Dean and Savina lost their lease. "We think they should stay with you for a few months. You've got extra space. You'll adjust." There was no question mark. No, "Would you be okay with this?" Just assumption. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over reply. Then I set the phone down, picked up my keys, and locked the door, top and bottom. I didn't need to respond. I already knew the answer. It was a Friday afternoon, and I'd gotten off work early, rare, unexpected, and welcome. My back was sore from a double shift, and my only plan was to soak in a hot bath, microwave leftover chili, and pretend for one evening that life was quieter than it actually was. As I turned onto my street, I noticed a car already in the driveway, Dean's SUV. I slowed down, blinked hard. Maybe he was visiting our parents, who lived 2 streets over. But as I pulled closer, I saw something that made my stomach tighten. 2 neon plastic toys rolling across my lawn, one of them tangled in the garden hose I'd just coiled the night before. I parked in front of the house, heart thudding. The porch light was on, the door slightly ajar. Inside, the smell hit first: baby wipes, something fried, and a floral air freshener I didn't own. There was a trail of snack wrappers leading into the living room. A pack-and-play had been set up between my recliner and the bookshelf. I stepped further in, past shoes that weren't mine, a stroller parked beside the hallway wall, and a baby bottle on my kitchen counter. My bedroom door, my one sanctuary, was open. Boxes lined the wall. My clothes had been shoved into black trash bags and stacked haphazardly in the corner. The master bedroom had been transformed. Savina's pink robe hung on the doorknob. Diaper bags leaned against the dresser. A crib blocked the window. Dean appeared from the kitchen, holding a sandwich. "Hey," he said, like I'd just walked into someone else's house. "What is this?" My voice came out tighter than I intended. "Mom said you'd understand," he said with a shrug. "Just temporary. We're between places." "You didn't think to call?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "You weren't using the whole house anyway," he said, taking another bite. "There's enough room for all of us." I turned around and walked out the front door, called a locksmith from the driveway. I didn't scream. I didn't ask questions. I just stood there, looking at my home like a crime scene, breathing through the rage. It wasn't the invasion that hurt. It was the assumption that I would accept it, that I would fold like I always had. 3 days later, a notice came from my bank. Apparently, my checking account, one I'd had since I was 19, had recently been flagged for activity under a joint authorization. I hadn't added anyone. The inquiry showed a co-signer had been listed from the beginning. My mother had been there the day I opened that account. She must have slipped Dean's name on the form. I requested a full transaction history. There it was. Dean had used my account as collateral on a small business loan over a decade ago. It had been declined, then forgotten. The activity wasn't recent, but it was active enough to risk my credit. I closed the account the next morning, opened a new one at a credit union across town. No phone calls, no explanations. Quiet. Back at the house, I printed a notice of eviction. Wording it took hours. I Googled templates, reworded lines twice over, then sat at the kitchen table and stared at the paper. My hands shook as I wrote the date. No one likes the woman who speaks up, especially not after years of silence. But someone had to speak. I taped the letter on the fridge. The next morning, Savina found it. She stormed into my room without knocking. "You think you're better than us?" she snapped. "Just because you don't have kids doesn't mean you get to judge how we live." I didn't move. I kept typing on my laptop, scrolling through job invoices. She continued, "You're bitter, cold, heartless. No wonder no one wants to be around you." I looked up, calmly. "You were never invited." She stared at me for a beat, then slammed the door. That night, the house was silent, except for the baby crying through the walls. The following evening, I got a text from my mother. "Their family, be patient." I didn't write back. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, snapped a picture of the eviction notice still taped to the fridge, then another of my bedroom, bare, stripped of warmth, of dignity. I sent both. No words. If patience is letting others rewrite your story, then I'd been too patient already. Sunday lunch at my parents' house was never relaxing, but that day I had agreed. against every internal warning bell. It had been weeks since I last stepped through their door, and something in me thought maybe I'd misjudged things. Maybe time had softened old patterns. Maybe I wouldn't leave feeling like a child who'd shown up to a party no one wanted her at. We sat around the old dining table, the one with the chipped corner Dad never fixed, passing mashed potatoes and overcooked green beans like it was Thanksgiving. Dean talked mostly about his work, a few contracts coming together soon, while Savina chimed in about how daycare costs were outrageous. But, you do what you gotta do, right? I kept my answers short, polite. I was halfway through my plate when Corinne cleared her throat and set down her fork gently, like what she was about to say required a shift in mood. Dean's been looking into some housing grants, she began, folding her napkin too precisely. Some of them require co-ownership on paper. If you were to add his name to your deed, just temporarily, it would really help his chances. The room didn't fall silent. Dean took a sip of his drink. My dad kept eating like she'd just asked me to pass the salt. My fork paused mid-air. I set it down carefully. You want me to give Dean co-ownership of my house? It's just paperwork? Dean said quickly, like he was offering to borrow a lawn chair. Nothing would really change. You'd still live there. It's just to qualify for the program. I looked across the table. So, I put his name on the deed. And if something goes wrong, if he defaults on anything, whose name do you think the creditors come after? You're being dramatic, my mother snapped. This is what families do. We help each other. Or maybe you've forgotten what that means. No, I said quietly. I remember exactly what that means. My father didn't look up. He chewed slowly, the rhythm of avoidance. I excused myself soon after dessert, claiming I had a shift to prepare for. That evening, I pulled out a box of documents I hadn't touched in years. Tax forms, receipts, insurance records. Something about that conversation had left an itch I couldn't shake. Buried between two old utility statements was a folded hospital invoice from nearly 8 years ago. Dean's name on the patient line, mine listed as the emergency contact. Under insurance provider, my name was typed in all caps. I never knew, never approved it. And now I remembered the strange letter that showed up years ago, asking me to verify my mailing address for coverage updates. I'd tossed it, assuming it was junk. They didn't just expect me to give. They'd already been taking. I called the insurance company first, confirmed the details, then the bank. I reviewed every linked account, severed all joint affiliations, even the ones from high school that had somehow still lingered. I added fraud alerts, set pins. Not because I was scared, because I was done being sloppy with trust. I wasn't just cleaning up messes. I was erasing the fingerprints they left on my future. Later that week, Dean sent me a message around midnight. You've changed. You used to be softer. Guess money makes people hard. I stared at it for a moment before replying, no, being stolen from does. The next morning, I walked out to grab my paper and stopped cold. Trash bags, a dozen of them, piled across my lawn. Inside them, my childhood things. Boxes I hadn't seen in years. Photo frames, notebooks, old clothes. Dumped like an afterthought. A photo frame lay shattered near the driveway. The one with the picture of me at age 7, standing in front of the fireplace, holding up a lopsided gingerbread house. I didn't call anyone. I didn't take pictures for proof. I just stood there, letting the cold seep into my shoes, staring at the remnants of who they thought I was, and who they expected me to remain. They weren't moving in. They were moving me out. The kettle had just started to whistle when I noticed the envelope on the kitchen table. I didn't remember bringing in mail the night before. It wasn't stamped, not sealed either, just slid there like a message from a ghost. My name was on it, but not in my handwriting. The font looked off, the layout cheap, like someone had Googled official template and printed it out without checking the margins. I poured my coffee, ignoring it for a few minutes, convincing myself it was something benign. Maybe a leftover form Savina printed. a leftover prank, something forgettable. But curiosity always wins with me, especially when it comes dressed in paper that doesn't belong. I opened it. Rental agreement. Tenant, Dean Whitaker. Landlord, Nadine Rowell. Length of occupancy, undetermined. At the bottom, my signature, or something meant to look like it. I sat down. Quietly. No storm of emotion. Just a long breath that ended in something like a shiver. I pulled out the real deed from the drawer in the back hallway, compared the dates, the formatting. The forged version had used my old address. The signature was close, but the loop in the R was wrong. Too tight. Too clean. They didn't just want space. They wanted legal weight. They wanted permission, without ever asking. That night, after work, I scrolled through my camera footage. I'd installed a Ring cam months ago, mostly to keep an eye on packages. But something in me, something quiet and deeply tired, had told me to upgrade it to cover the side yard too. 2 nights ago. Dean, Savina, flashlights, boxes. They had moved in while I was away at work. Dean carried a mattress through the side gate. Savina handed him a toddler wrapped in a blanket, then followed with a duffel bag. They didn't rush. They didn't sneak. They looked like people moving into their second home. I saved the footage to my cloud, my external drive, and an SD card. 3 copies. Labeled the folder, proof, just in case. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was strategy. The next morning, I printed a new eviction notice. Same as before, but with an addendum. You have 72 hours. After that, it's legal. I taped it to the fridge. Took a photo, time-stamped it. Then emailed that photo to my lawyer with no subject line. She'd know what it meant. I changed the locks. Not because I was scared, but because I was done playing host to people who treated my house like a waiting room. I informed the HOA. Left out the personal details. Just the paperwork, the footage, the forged signature. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was reclaiming the version of me they'd erased, one boundary at a time. No raised voices, no confrontations, just action and silence. That afternoon, I walked past Dean in the hallway. He looked up from the couch where he was scrolling on his phone and said, "You know, you don't have to be like this. We're family." I didn't reply. I didn't stop walking. That night, I reheated pasta and ate standing by the window. The baby had finally stopped crying. Savina had locked herself in the bedroom after a long passive-aggressive monologue about not feeling welcome. Dean hadn't said a word since lunch. The house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Then, at 10:12 p.m., the power went out for exactly 5 seconds. Long enough for the heater to click off, for the hallway light to flicker, for my phone screen to go black. Then it came back. Normal. Almost. On the floor by the back door, folded neatly, was a slip of paper. Someone had slid it underneath. I picked it up. 4 words, scrawled in blue pen. "We're not leaving." I didn't panic. I didn't reply. I just opened the camera app and hit record. I was just trying to check the neighborhood group. That's all it was. I wanted to see if anyone had found my missing garden shears. Little did I know I'd find something else entirely. At the top of my feed, a post glared back at me, shared by my cousin Megan, and tagged with nearly every relative I could name. It wasn't subtle. The picture was of a dining table, kids' coats thrown over the chairs, and the caption read, "Some people forget who raised them." When you have more, you share, especially with your struggling brother and his kids. The comments piled up fast. Family comes first. I don't care what she's been through. If your brother needs a roof, you offer him yours. Unbelievable. I remember when she was living out of her car. How quickly we forget. My name wasn't mentioned. It didn't have to be. The whole post bled with implication, each reply twisting the knife deeper. Corinne had found her audience, and I wasn't in it. I didn't comment. I didn't like or defend. I scrolled, slowly, watched as people I hadn't heard from in years chimed in like they'd been beside me through every struggle, every silence, every slammed door. Some even used my own words, twisted sideways, phrases I'd once shared in confidence now reworded as evidence that I was cold, ungrateful, disconnected. I took screenshots, every line, every emoji. Then I logged out. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means I'm calculating. Later that night, I was combing through my camera footage for another timestamp. Dean had taken the lawnmower again without asking, and I stumbled on a new audio file. The outdoor mic had picked up something odd from a few days prior, right before the power flickered. Voices. It took me a second to realize who it was. The tone was hushed, but unmistakable. "Don't ask her," Corinne's voice whispered. "Just move in. She'll fold. She always does." Then a laugh, Dean's, sharp and dry like the crunch of leaves under boots. "She acts tough, but she's just waiting for someone to tell her what to do." The clip ended there. I sat back in my chair, replayed it twice. No tears, no fists against the table, just a tightening. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had planned for it. The next morning, I opened a folder titled Document Everything. I uploaded the voicemail, the video of Dean moving in at night, the texts, the forged lease, and now, the Facebook ambush. Then I called the free legal clinic I'd found months ago and scheduled a consult. Civil trespass, forgery, harassment, possibly defamation. The woman on the phone didn't gasp or scold. She just said, "You have a case." They wanted me to be quiet. I was. But quiet isn't weak, it's preparation. I left the eviction notice where it hung, untouched and bold on the fridge. Instead, I printed a new sign and taped it to the guest bedroom door. Reserved for legal counsel. Later that day, while running errands, I bought a voice-activated mic from the tech aisle at Walmart. Not fancy, not expensive, just effective. I placed it in the hallway ceiling vent, set to record any conversation longer than 10 seconds. Let them talk. Let them feel safe. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the pines, I poured a glass of tea and sat at the kitchen table. Nothing in the house moved, not even a creak, but I could feel the weight of what was coming. At 9:14 p.m., a ping hit my phone. Private message, Megan. "I didn't know it was this bad," she wrote. "I have something you should see." Attached was a screenshot from a private family group chat, one I hadn't known existed. It was a photo of my house from the street, taken without my knowledge. Corinne had captioned it. "She won't even notice. It was never hers in the first place." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. They never thought I'd fight. The tea kettle hissed low, but I let it scream a little longer before turning off the stove. It was oddly soothing, the whine of steam filling the kitchen. While it whistled, I watched the progress bar inch across the laptop screen, uploading a folder titled Truth to the server of the local station's investigative show, Know Your Rights. They'd contacted me weeks earlier, after someone anonymously submitted footage from a property camera showing my brother and his wife entering my home at night, uninvited, carrying boxes. I didn't ask who sent it. I didn't care. The folder I sent them was thicker now. Documents, video clips, audio files, and one particularly damning voicemail. "They wanted to ruin my name behind my back," I murmured to no one. So I decided to say it out loud, on the record. The segment aired that Thursday evening. I watched it alone, sitting at the edge of my bed. The host's voice was calm, almost gentle, as they laid it all out. Footage of Dean unlocking my front door with a copied key, Savina stacking diapers on my kitchen counter. The forged rental agreement with my signature, clearly mismatched from the original. A close-up of the time-stamped photo of the eviction notice on my fridge. Then, finally, the voicemail from Corinne. "Don't ask her, just move in. She'll fold. She always does." The host posed the question to the camera. What happens when a woman fights for the roof she built herself? I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. My phone lit up seconds after the credits rolled. Coworkers, neighbors, a woman I hadn't spoken to since college. Texts that said, "Good for you." Took guts. Wish I could do the same. I turned my phone over and went to pour another cup of tea. Dean posted on Facebook 10 minutes later. "You know how the media twists things. We didn't want drama, just shelter. Family doesn't mean lawsuits." Corinne shared a meme about loyalty. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Silence felt different now, like armor. A few days later, I was summoned to a peace meeting at the office of the family's estate attorney. They framed it as reconciliation, a chance to clear the air. I wore black and brought a folder labeled Legal Counsel Only. Corinne, Dean, and my father were already seated when I arrived. The air was thick with artificial calm. The lawyer slid a document toward me, a proposed will revision. It suggested splitting the family home equally, on the condition that Dean manage the family trust. Corinne smiled faintly. "We're thinking long-term. You'll still have your share." I picked up the paper, scanned it without expression, then looked up. "You've already managed enough of my life," I said, folding the document neatly. "This stops now." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I stood, placed my folder on the table, and left without looking back. Outside, the air smelled like wet leaves. My heels clicked against the sidewalk with rhythm and certainty. At work the next day, no one asked questions, but people stopped pretending they didn't know. One woman left a note on my desk. "You spoke for more of us than you realize." Online, I received messages from strangers. Some shared their own stories, siblings who'd taken inheritance, parents who'd played favorites to the point of cruelty. I read what I could. Then I turned off notifications and went barefoot into my backyard, letting the grass soak between my toes. I breathed, deeper than I had in years. The silence that followed wasn't hollow, it was earned. That week, Corinne called twice and left no voicemails. Dean posted vague quotes about betrayal and how some people forget where they came from. Half the family unfriended him. Tess sent me a note on a folded scrap of paper. It was written in pink ink with block letters. "Thank you for speaking truth. No one else ever does." Friday morning, I opened the mailbox and found a plain white envelope. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. Inside, there was a blurry photocopy of a utility bill, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. My name, his address, dated years back. Taped to the bottom was a note in messy print. It started way before you think. I held the paper a long time, long enough for the wind to pick up around me and shake the trees. The past wasn't done with me yet, but I was finally ready to face it. Silence used to make me anxious. Now, it's a kind of balm. The morning after the broadcast, I woke up and didn't hear the soft shuffle of Dean's slippers in the hallway, or Savina humming tunelessly while she messed with my microwave. The house was still, finally still. I reached for my phone out of habit, bracing myself. There were 32 new messages, some from coworkers, others from old high school acquaintances. 2 news articles had already gone up. Local woman reclaims property in bold legal move. And comments were flooding in. My name was trending in a small regional hashtag, and apparently, half the family had started unfriending Dean. I made coffee slowly. I didn't open the messages. Not yet. When the noise fades, truth remains. And sometimes, that's enough. That afternoon, I got the email from the bank. The investigation had wrapped. Dean had been pulling small amounts, $20, $40, from the old joint account my mother helped me open when I was 19. Listed as family utilities, the withdrawals were subtle enough to stay under the radar, but they added up. He'd been doing it for years. I forwarded the file to my attorney, then sat at my desk and drafted an invoice. Black and white, no decoration, no pretense. At the top, I typed, "For everything you borrowed and called love." They said I never gave, but they'd been taking since before I had anything to spare. That evening, just before sunset, Tess showed up at my doorstep with a backpack and silence. She didn't knock. She just stood there, looking up at me like I was the only person left on earth she could risk. I opened the door, stepped aside. She sat on the porch for a while, staring into the garden. I didn't ask any questions. An hour passed. I brought her a glass of milk and a peanut butter sandwich. She didn't speak until she was halfway through the second slice. "Mom throws things," she said quietly. "Dad tells me not to cry, but I know it's not my fault." The words didn't need reaction. They needed space. I thought about myself at that age, ducking arguments, avoiding rooms, pretending to be asleep. She wasn't just visiting. She was escaping the same silence I once thought was normal. We didn't talk much after that. She fell asleep on the couch with the cat curled at her feet. I pulled a blanket over her and let the house stay dark. The next morning, there was a voicemail from Corinne. "Your father's not eating. Dean's not talking. You've made things very hard." It wasn't angry. It was tired, flat, like someone trying to sound like the victim, but too drained to perform it properly. I didn't return the call. I saved the message. That was enough. Later that weekend, Tess and I painted an old bench in the backyard. She picked yellow, said it looked like sunflowers. We didn't speak much, just swapped brushes, refilled the paint cup, and let the breeze dry our silence. Maybe healing isn't loud. Maybe it's just having a place to sit without fear. As the light faded, we rinsed our hands under the hose. Tess laughed when the water splashed her shirt. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh in days. We went inside. I made grilled cheese. She asked to sleep in the spare room, and I said yes without hesitation. Hours later, after the dishes were done and the windows closed, she came into my room, holding something, a folded piece of paper. She handed it to me without a word, then walked out. On the front, "Please don't show this to Dad." I opened it slowly. I didn't expect what was inside, but it changed everything. The note Tess handed me the night before sat unopened on my nightstand until morning. I waited for daylight. Something about the quiet hours before dawn made even crayon drawings feel like confessions. I finally unfolded it at the kitchen table while the coffee brewed. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures, Tess, me, and what looked like a treehouse, with crooked smiles and a sun in the corner. Below it, in pencil, she had written, "I want to live with someone who doesn't yell." I didn't cry. That season of my life had passed. I didn't pity her, I recognized her. Later that morning, I began pulling paperwork to prepare for a guardianship consultation. Old tax files, student loan notices, expired W-2s. I needed documentation that proved I could provide care, steady income, stable housing, clean records. Buried between 2010 and 2011 tax folders was an envelope I hadn't seen in years. Inside, a college grant acceptance letter. My name printed cleanly at the top. I remembered getting that letter, the way I'd stared at it for an hour before telling anyone. But the check that came with it? I never saw it again. Taped to the back of the letter was a deposit receipt. Same month, different account. My mother's. The handwriting was hers. They didn't just take from me back then. They rewrote what I was allowed to become. I sat at the dining table, the same one I'd scrubbed clean after Dean and Savina left their greasy fingerprints across it, and stared at that receipt for a long time. When the bitterness began to rise, I didn't push it down. I printed 2 copies of everything, signed affidavits, proof of forged signatures, the utility bill with my name listed at Dean's old address, and now the grant theft. The next morning, I mailed 1 packet to my parents' house, the other to Dean's P.O. box. Each envelope contained a single-page cover letter. I kept it short. "Here is the cost of your silence. It's been calculated." I didn't expect a response. That was the point. My attorney moved quickly. Within a week, she filed for a formal guardianship inquiry regarding Tess. Simultaneously, a civil case was submitted against Dean for fraud, identity misuse, and property forgery. That Friday, Corinne called 3 times, left a voicemail. "You think the world runs on justice, Nadine, but all you're doing is burning bridges. "Don't expect anyone to catch you when you fall." Dean texted me the same night. 2 words. "You monster." I blocked them both. The next afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bed with a camcorder from the storage closet. Not my phone, not a fancy DSLR. Just something simple, something real. I hit record. My name is Nadine Rowell. The first time I was erased, I was 19. The second time, I was silent. This time, I'm going to sign every page with my full name. I looked into the lens and spoke to Tess, to myself, to anyone who'd ever been told, "It's just family." I wasn't documenting pain anymore. I was archiving proof of survival. That evening, I turned off the porch light and began straightening up the living room. As I fluffed the pillows, the doorbell rang. It was 6:47 p.m. I opened the door. Tess stood on the porch, her small suitcase at her side, fingers curled tightly around the handle. Behind her, a woman in a blazer and sensible flats offered a soft smile and said, "Ms. Rowell, I'm with Child Protective Services. Tess has asked to stay here temporarily while we evaluate placement options." I nodded. Tess didn't speak. She didn't have to. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. I didn't expect custody to start with a knock, but maybe justice always does. Tess stood at the foot of the dresser, folding her own shirts with the kind of care most adults forget how to give. Every item went in a neat pile. Every drawer she closed gently. She hadn't asked where her things should go. She just started placing them, like she already knew she was staying. I watched her from the hallway, holding a mug of tea gone cold. It wasn't the house that made me feel safe. It was the first time someone looked at me and didn't expect less. Later that day, the mail came. A thin envelope, cream-colored, with my name in a familiar handwriting that looked more cautious than it used to. It was from my mother. No return address, but I knew her script anywhere. Inside wasn't an apology, it was a plea. "Let's put this behind us, for the sake of family." She didn't mention the forged lease, the voicemail, the broadcast, only the idea that things were hard and maybe it was time to move forward. I stood in the backyard and read the letter once. Then I took it to the fire pit, lit the match, and watched it curl into smoke. There was never a why, only a version of me that served them. 2 days later, I found a glass pie dish on the front porch with a sticky note. "Thanks for being brave." No signature. That week, a coworker left a card on my desk with nothing inside but the words, "You reminded me I could too." Support wasn't loud. It wasn't paraded in hashtags or group texts. It arrived quietly, in gestures shaped like understanding, like healing. Tess started therapy on Wednesdays. I drove her there, waited in the parking lot with a book I never got past chapter 2 of. On the way home, she always asked if we could get soft pretzels. We always did. We built new routines. Grocery runs together, weeding the garden, pizza on Fridays. I let her pick the toppings. She always picked olives, just olives. One night after dinner, we sat on the porch while she painted her nails and I strung up outdoor lights. She looked at me and said, almost casually, "I feel like this is what home is supposed to mean." I didn't reply. I didn't want to ruin it with words. Later that week, I got a notice that my old storage unit was expiring next month. I hadn't been there in years. I figured it was time. I took Tess with me. She liked old things, mystery boxes and rusted keys. The metal door groaned as I lifted it. Inside were remnants I hadn't thought about in over a decade. A box of childhood books, a high school diploma never framed, baby clothes my mom had packed away without telling me. We made 2 piles, keep and discard. I kept the books, I kept the diploma. I threw out the clothes. Some things deserved space. Some things didn't. That night, I recorded one last video. Not for court, not for social media, for me. I wasn't selfish, I said into the lens. I was surviving, and now I'm living. That's not a betrayal, that's a beginning. The next morning, Tess checked the mail before I could get to it. There was one envelope, plain white, her name on the front. The return address, Dean Whitaker. Tess looked up at me. I held the envelope, feeling the weight of something that had nothing to do with paper. Maybe some endings arrive sealed, and some we choose not to open. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter for an hour before I touched it. Tess had handed it to me silently, her eyes darting between the note and my face. I turned it over a few times, studying the edges. Then I handed it back to her. "If you want to read it, I'll listen," I said gently. "If you don't, I'll throw it out." She thought about it, then opened it with careful fingers. "I'm sorry for dragging you into something that wasn't yours to carry," she read aloud. "I hope someday we can talk again." Tess didn't say anything. She crumpled the paper, walked to the trash, and dropped it in without a word. I didn't press. Some wounds don't need salt, they need space. That Monday, I went down to the county clerk's office. The woman at the desk recognized me from the segment. She didn't smile out of pity, just a nod of respect. I filed a restraining order, not because I was scared, because it was time. I updated my emergency contacts, scrubbed my insurance files, removed any lingering trace of Whitaker or Easton from forms that had long outlived their relevance. Some lines are drawn to divide, others to define. The following weekend, I was invited to speak at a local panel. Boundaries and Justice, When Family Crosses the Line. It was hosted at the community center, nothing grand. Plastic chairs, lukewarm coffee. But the room was full. Teachers, nurses, bus drivers. Women who looked like they'd been holding their breath for 20 years. I shared my story, not as revenge, but as reminder. "You don't owe forgiveness," I said into the mic. "You owe yourself peace." There was no applause, just nods. That was enough. A week later, the civil case closed. Dean didn't show. The judge ruled in my favor. Fines were issued. A public apology mandated. A court-ordered restriction from the property. After the ruling, my attorney leaned toward me. "Would you like to make a statement?" I shook my head. The paperwork speaks loud enough. The next evening, I hosted something in the backyard. Not a party, just food, laughter. Enough folding chairs for a few neighbors, and Tess's classmate from school. Someone brought cornbread. Someone else brought wine. We grilled. We talked. We didn't mention the past. Tess strung paper lanterns between the trees. She asked if we could keep them up through winter. At some point, I stepped away and stood near the porch light. They said I had too much space for one person. I whispered. Maybe I just had room to heal. After everyone left, I washed the dishes by hand. No music, no distraction. Just the rhythm of warm water and clean starts. Then came a knock. It was Lena Durst. She held a worn binder to her chest. "I kept everything," she said. "From school, from when Dean told everyone you were a mistake. Want it back?" I took the binder and nodded. I didn't ask why she'd kept it. Some people just know what's important to hold on to. That night, I placed the binder beside my bed. My name isn't selfish. My silence wasn't weakness. This house wasn't luck. This was all me.